As if this week wasn't exciting enough, we not only got the nuclear ban list for premium, but we also got the surprise reveals of the card units and their skill description for the upcoming V-Clan collection sets Volume 3 and Volume 4. And let me tell you, they are looking pretty spicy.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today we've got a very exciting one because just like last time with the V-Clan collection reveals, Bushi decided to reveal these cards preemptively with their card artworks as well as skill description to basically start the hype train before the actual card reveals will happen, maybe 1 or 2 months down the line. But it doesn't stop us from being excited as well as speculating how strong these cards are going to be and what the skill description actually means. So today let's talk about all the cards they revealed so far, and they already revealed 8 of the 24 clans. So we have quite a lot to go over. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into these reveals and analyze the skill description to have an idea what they can mean for their respective support wave. So first we got the reveals for Spike Brothers, and Spike Brothers is very surprising because as we can see here, they got Dudley Emperor Reverse. This is a brand new card as they never got a reverse card prior to this, so they chose to reverse Dudley Emperor, and this is very interesting because it's once again a new wave of Dudley support, and this probably makes the current Dudley deck even better. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a look at the other cards and the skill description of the other units. So first off, we have the grade 1, which is Machine Gun Gloria, and its effect reads as: after it boosts a rearguard, by putting that rearguard to the deck, draw a card. It becomes a rearguard after guarding, so it's useful offensive and defensively. This is very simple because it probably will have 2 effects. One is going to be an unboost effect, and it allows you basically to put a rearguard to the bottom and draw a card, which is cycle effect, which then also can synergize with your Dudley cards, which they themselves already put them back to the deck if you sit on Emperor. So this can interact with that engine as well, but as soon as this doesn't have a Dudley name, I don't know if that impacts negatively with the synergy of the Dudley engine, but this could be an interesting card. But then if we take a look at the grade 2, we've got Ezel Fullback, and its description reads as: during the turn it is placed, it can attack from the center back row rearguard circle and can call a copy of itself from the deck by putting itself to the soul. So this is actually very interesting because this gives Spike Brothers access to more multi-attack, and it can call a copy of itself, which means it's more inherent multi-attack. Now, the fact that it specifies during the turn it's placed, it allows us to attack from the back row. I assume that this will either have a hard once per turn restriction, so you cannot keep looping with it for every copy you have, or it probably has the effect that it needs to be placed from hand to get these skills. So it depends on what type of restriction you're going to put in place of this card. This card could be very good for combo potential or just high aggressive octane action, or it can be an alright card if the restriction is a bit too harsh on the card. And then for Emperor, we've got Great Demon Emperor Dudley Emperor Reverse, which is of course a grade 3, and its skill reads as: the skill to continuously call allies and attack during the battle phase is still present, and every time a rearguard is returned to deck, by cursing, locking, another rearguard, it gains a massive power up. Aim for an overwhelming formation by sacrificing allies and end it with an unmatched blow. So this is interesting because it's very similar to the original Emperor, where you put cards back to the deck, only now it has this lock mechanic acquired to it, which probably means this synergizes very nicely with the previous Emperor, but now you will have a way to lock your rear guards, gain power up, and then come off with a giant beater that can either be your Vanguard or rearguard depending on how this skill is going to be put into place. So this is very interesting. I'm very curious how this will interact with the current Dudleys that we already have. I think it's going to work very nicely with the normal Emperor, but we have to wait and see until we get the actual skills. Now moving on to the second clan, we've got the reveals of Gold Paladin, and we already knew that we're going to get Grand Ezel Scissors, but now we also know that the support lineup itself is going to comprise out of White Lion and Badge the Magus. And for White Lion, we have the skill description: when its attack hits, it can add multiple grade 3 Ezels to hand. This is very interesting and can be very powerful because You're going to need multiple Ezels for the Ezel right line, because you're going to need to have Blonde Ezel, as well as Ravenhair, and potentially Platina, and potentially also Grand Ezel to do your whole superior ride engine. So having access to these Ezels on a more consistent basis can be very good. So this can be a very nice card. Sadly, it's an unhit, so your opponent still has some leeway in it. But who knows, maybe there is some good interaction that makes this card at least a bit more consistent. And it's also just generic deck filtering, which is also nice because you're going to run an excessive amount of grade 3s in Ezel typically. So having a way to filter them out on a consistent basis is also very nice. And then for the grade 2, we have the skill description. Gets more powerful for each Ezel in your soul. In addition, if you have a grade 3 in soul, it can battle multiple units. So I assume there's going to be a front row attacker or maybe a column attacker. But the fact that it becomes more powerful with more Ezel in the soul is very nice, because Ezel is all about superior riding and stacking multiple Ezel in the soul by superior riding. So this is a perfect grade 2 to just put more pressure behind the attacks, because Ezel is all about superior riding, but typically the rearguards themselves are kind of lackluster because your focus is all around the Vanguard. So having a card like this that actually powers up the rearguard columns as well can make Ezel very versatile and very dangerous all across the board. And then we've got Ezel himself, which is Grand Ezel Scissors, and its skill text reads as, supports all Ezels up until now. By gathering the power of Ezel, the lion breaks the lock and weaves the new future. So this is interesting because it supports all Ezels up to now. What it actually means, we have no clue. Does it mean that it can copy their skills like we see with the cross? Does it mean it gains additional skills if you have a specific Ezel as the Vanguard or in the soul, or just a certain amount of Ezel in the soul? This basically can go all the way. And interesting enough, it can probably unlock your card, so this can be a great counter to Link Joker against Chaos Breaker Dragon. So we have to wait and see how that pans out, but it's very nice to see. And this might be the new boss unit, or this might be a new tech option that you can use in a more luck-orientated meta where Chaos Breaker Dragon runs more rampant, and maybe even useful in Premium is if luck makes a return in Premium as well. Now moving on to the third clan that we've got, and this is surprising because we've got Kagero, but Kagero got 3 grade 3s. There isn't one line of archetype support. No, they got 3 grade 3s. They got Dragonic Lawkeeper, Blazing Flare Dragon, and Dauntless Dominate Dragon Reverse. So Dauntless Dominate Dragon we saw coming because of all the reverse units. But Dragonic Lawkeeper and Blazing Flare Dragon are completely left field here for me. So this is actually kind of surprising, but let's take a look at their skill description. So for Dragonic Lawkeeper, we've got, you can suppress your opponent's attack by temporarily binding their rearguards during their turn. Then power up your field based on how many of your opponent's circles are open. So this is interesting, because this is disruption during your opponent's turn, and surprisingly it's binding instead of attacking. But I think because you disrupt your opponents during their turn, they don't want to outright retire it. They just temporarily remove it, so that's why they resort to binding, as it then probably comes back at the end of their turn. But this can be very powerful if this is done right. Just being able to disrupt your opponents during their turn is very reminiscent of G-Guardians like the Now Griffin and whatnot. So yeah, this could be very spicy. It might be actually pretty useful in Premium as well. Then we also got Blazing Flare Dragon, which skill description reads as, has a skill to retire rearguards by soul blasting any number of cards. If you soul blast 5, then not only the rearguards. That's pretty spicy, because you soul blast for retire, which is not that bad, but soul blasting 5 and then retire, and then they are very mysterious and descriptive about what it does. I can think of 2 things what this can mean. Either it allows you to do the same thing what we saw with Vowing Sword Dragon, where you can retire straight out from the deck, so they are forced to retire multiple copies of that unit, or you just outright retire their opponent's Vanguard. And that's not something new. We saw this with Drachma, so we know how the interactions works. So this might be possible that Blazing Flare Dragon might be the super retire unit that just is able to retire your opponent's Vanguard, which can be very devastating because they're probably forced to go to grade 2 or grade 3, depending on what is in their soul, or if they're forced to write from hand like we saw with Drachma. So yeah, this could be very interesting. So Dragonic Lawkeeper and Blazing Flare Dragon, pretty spicy cards. But then we also got Dauntless Dominate Dragon Reverse, and its description reads as, put a card's drive check down as a lock card and get an additional drive. At the end of the battle, sacrifice the placed lock cards to Write this on top of Dauntless Dragon and aim for a large number of drive checks. So this, just like we saw with the Dudley reverse, this synergizes with Dauntless Dragon. Only in this case, it directly synergizes by cross-riding it to some extent to get more value, which is great, especially with the resistance capabilities. But being able to put your drive checks onto the field as lock card to get more drive checks is very interesting, and then being able to sacrifice those cards for something is unique. I'm very curious of what that actually will mean, if that may be more power or just retires or whatnot. I'm very curious to what that actually means, because I believe the original version could retire your opponent's units when drive checking certain cards, so I'm curious if that has something to do with this. But overall, it basically means Dauntless is about attacking with the Vanguard multiple times and have a buttload of drive checks. So yeah, this could be powerful. Then for the fourth clan that we've got is, surprisingly enough, we've got Great Nature. But for Great Nature, we don't have any reversions because we don't see Leopold reverse. We've got the return of Coiling Duckbill. Yes, Coiling Duckbill, where a lot of people are crazy about. Then we also got Guardian of Truth Locks, which I don't ever want to see again after that fiasco with Zero. And then for their main Grade 3, we've got Battler of Twin Brush Polaris. So Polaris is going to be the new main Grade 3, but Lux, if I remember correctly, was also a right line. So this is presumably also a Grade 3, unless they go for the Grade 2, but that would be kind of weird. But let's see, take a look at what the description of these cards reads. So for Duckbill, we have return it to the hand when it is discarded from your deck. So that basically means the lottery mechanic. When it is retired by a card's ability, draw 1. So this basically explains its skill on its own. It's very similar to what we saw with the Chetnor support, where it basically supports Big Belly as well as Isabel, so I think that's fine. I don't think this card is going to be overly amazing because it tries to support both archetypes, but in general sense, I think it's a solid card. Then for Lux, we have the skill description. He can support a wide range of Grade 3 units. Put a large amount of Grade 3s into your deck to activate a powerful skill. This is interesting because this card tells us to build a deck in a specific way. This sounds very similar to Highlander, so I'm very curious how they're going to design this card. Does it mean you need to check or reveal the top X cards of your deck, and if there is an X amount of Grade 3s in those top cards, you do something or get something? Or put them into your soul and then you get something? This is very interesting. I'm very curious of what direction they're going to take this, and this is probably going to be their own little engine or their own deck, so I'm curious how that's going to pan out. And then we also got Polaris, which has the description: share your power amongst your allies, give 50,000 power to a unit, and stand it. What happens when it gives 70k power or more? Sharpen Polaris blades to find out. Yeah, that could be kind of ridiculous. This all depends on how this power gain works and what that 70k power gain actually means. Probably it means you can either give it 50k and stand it, or 70k and do something else or something. But basically, Great Nature is going to have access to insane power gain with Polaris. Now, I assume they're going to be retired afterwards, or you're going to pay a hefty amount of cost for this. But this looks pretty interesting depending on how this is going to pan out. So Polaris, big power gain. Now moving on to the fifth clan, we've got Murakumo. And for Murakumo, surprise, surprise, we got Hyakki Vogue reverse. So this is what we expected because Hyakki Vogue is already in the V series. And this was also originally a reverse unit. But surprisingly, besides that, we also see Platinum Blonde Fox Spirit Tamamo. And we see a new unit, which is Special Stealth Beast Weasel Black. Interesting enough, all these cards are Grade 3s. So we have a Grade 3 for the Weasels, and we have more Grade 3s for Murakumo, which can maybe give the deck more engines, and hopefully will do something in premium as well. So first off, let's take a look at the skill description for the Weasels, as we have Special Stealth Beast Weasel Black, and it reads: a wild Special Stealth Beast Grade 3 appears. Gather your Special Stealth Beast unit and launch a powerful attack. This reads very similar to Weasel Red, I believe, the Grade 2 that allows you to superior column from deck. I think this is basically a Grade 3 version of that, and I assume it allows also to maybe multi-attack, but we have to wait and see until we get the actual skill. Now for Platinum Blonde Fox Spirit Tamamo, its skill reads as: has a skill to turn into another unit when placed. When attacking with stealth fiends of different names, it powers up. Okay, so this to me feels like a support card for the Stealth Fiend decks that we got in the previous clan selection support wave with Yoga, I believe. But the problem is that this card doesn't have the Stealth Feat name, so it doesn't directly synergize with the engine, but I'm very curious how this will pan out because it does synergize with Stealth Feat in general, and it has a Metamorphox-like effect, so this can also activate with more combo potential. And then finally for Yucky Vogue Reverse, we have, by locking your allies, call a great amount of Yucky Vogues in combination with Yucky Vogue, the normal one, overwhelm your opponent with the power of clones. So this is very similar to Yucky Vogue, where you're just going to superior call multiple copies, and with Yucky Vogue being able to power up those copies, this probably will mean that we're going to have a lot of attacks with the same type of units, and are going to be of sizable numbers. So this could be a very interesting engine, and might have some application premium, because we also have these Yucky Vogue's Stride cards, which then can synergize with this potentially, so we have to wait and see how this will play out. Now moving on to the 6th clan, we've got Grand Blue, and for Grand Blue, surprise, surprise, we've got the return of Cocytus or Cucutus Reverse. But alongside with it, we also see another Grand Blue Legion in the likes of Ghoul Dragon and Necro Bolt. So first off, for the description of Ghoul Dragon, which is of course a grade 2, when it attacks, it can retire your opponent. Furthermore, it has a skill to support Necro Bolt. Now, interesting enough, it says when it attacks, it can retire your opponent, not when it can retire your opponent's rearguards. Probably is a mistranslation or just doesn't translate all too well to English. I assume it's supposed to be meaning that on attack it can retire one of your opponent's rearguards, because it would kind of funny if you can retire your opponent itself. That would instantly win the game, but that's besides the point. And it can support Necrobolt, the grade 3 to some extent, so that's probably going to be a separate skill. Now, talking about Necrobolt, its description reads says, the more cards you put into your drop zone in a turn, all your rearguards gain an increase in power and shield until your next turn. So this is interesting because we have a lot of cards in Grand Blue that mill your deck, but now you get extra value on top of that the more you mill in a single turn. So this feels more like a one-turn all-out attack or all-out strategy, because you probably want to stack up on a lot of mills in one turn and then try to kill that turn, but you cannot sustain that multiple turns because deck out is going to be a problem. Unless this deck is going to be more sustainable in the sense that you maybe want to mill like 4 cards a turn, and that's enough. It all comes down to what the payout is of actually milling and how strong that payout can actually turn into a win condition. So I have to wait and see how that will pan out. And then finally for Cocytus Reverse, we got the skill description. At the end of the battle, your Cocytus, the old one, attacked. By locking your rearguards, write it from drop zone. When it attacked, it can power up by sacrificing your rearguards. Restanding Vanguards from the drop zone for Grand Blue. Yeah, that can be very powerful and very deadly, especially if you combine it with the old Cocytus, because the old Cocytus can be a very strong Vanguard attack that can also build a field if it's correctly set up. And then that can go into a Cocytus Vanguard itself for a second Vanguard swing that then can sacrifice your rearguards for more power, so that can be very interesting. So maybe that might make the Cocytus deck even more consistent. But interesting enough, in Premium, this is yet another attacking Vanguard, because you can effectively go from the ghost ship, or the shipwright, or I forget the name, the ship stride that allows you to superior write a grade 3 from your deck after the Vanguard attack. So you first attack with the stride, then you rewrite a grade 3 from a drop zone, then attack with that. If that is Cocytus, it is plausible that then after that attack you can go into Cocytus Reverse. Yeah, that looks actually pretty spicy, I'm not gonna lie, that looks actually really interesting. So I'm very curious how that's going to pan out, but overall, looks pretty good. And then for the final 2 clans, we've got Dimension Police. And for Dimension Police, surprisingly enough, we got Motorcycles and Zero. And no, I'm not talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds and Vanguard Zero. No, I'm talking about these 2 motorcycles and original Saver Zero. So let's take a look at what their skill description reads and what this new Dimension Police support wave has in store for us. So first off, we got Eternity Chaser. And Eternity Chaser has the skill description: when written on, adds the necessary grade 3 to your hand. Furthermore, it has a skill to nullify an opponent's rearguard attack. So this is interesting because it probably means we can search out for 0 if we write this on grade 1. And the nullify rearguard attack, that can either mean it's a pseudo perfect guard, or maybe if it's on the Vanguard circle you can just cancel a rearguard attack once a turn or something like that. It's basically more defensive options, but how that's going to work out, we have to wait and see. Now for the grade 2, we got Endless Float. And Endless Float has the description: when written on, increase your Vanguard's power while calling itself. I probably assume that they meant that if you write the grade 3 on top of it, you can call the grade 2 out of the soul and then power up the Vanguard. I think that's what they mean with this. And then also, when it attacks during the turn a grade 3 is placed, it further increases its power. So probably you write the grade 3, calls it out, powers up the grade 3, attack with it, and powers up the grade 3 even further, which is pretty nice for Dimension Police. And if this is generic, this could be a nice grade 2 that you can just tag in any Dimension Police deck, especially with Dimensional Robo and whatnot. So pretty interesting. But then we also got the grade 3, which is Original Saver 0, which has the skill, your allies and your opponent all will be 0. Do we have a deleter effect on our hands? Naturally, the skill to reduce the opponent's power is present, but beyond that, question mark, exclamation point, with its skill that activates when written on, combine the power of grade 3s up until now with the old hero. Okay, this is interesting because apparently we can minus our opponent's Vanguard's power, including our own units, which I don't know how that's gonna pan out, but it also has some way to combine the powers of grade 3s. So does it mean every grade 3 it writes upon, it copies their skill, or just it copies all the skills that are in the soul of the grade 3s to get some power skills out of it? This is very vague, it can literally mean anything, so we have to wait and see what Zero has in store for us. But the original Zero wasn't really all that great from what I remember, so I'm very curious if this new Zero is actually going to be good, and maybe it's going to be nice with Zeal, which is also about the lowering and reducing the opponent's power. So that might also be a nice interaction, but we have to wait and see until we get the actual skill. Now, for the final clan reveal that we've got today, we've got Link Joker. And honestly, this card isn't all too surprising because for Link Joker, we got the reveal of Star-Vader, Nebula Lord Dragon. Yes, some might thought that we might get Glendios because of the reverse units, but Nebula Lord Dragon is one of the few boss units that we haven't seen so far because we have Chaos Breaker Dragon, we got Infinity Zero Dragon, so Nebula Lord Dragon was also one of those very prominent boss units. And I think we're going to get Glendios in the following 2 clan collections at the end of next year, because that probably will be the end of the reverse arc of V-Series that we're going to have in 2022. Now, as for the other cards, we've got the Grade 1 Mana Shot Star-Vader Neon, and Neon's skill description reads says, if your opponent has a lock card, you can call it from the drop at the beginning of the battle phase. That's interesting, because this is basically field recursion that allows Link Joker to preserve their hand, and it seems they're more of a stall tactic. That can be really good over the course of multiple turns, depending on how costly the skill is. If it's a counter blast, maybe not worth it. If it's a soul blast, that's maybe good enough. If it's free, then it's pretty ridiculous. So we have to wait and see what that's going to pan out. Then for the grade 2, we've got Unrivaled Star-Vader Radon, and Radon has the description, at the start of your battle phase, you can call it from the drop zone to a column with a Star-Vader. It also has a skill that restricts guards when it attacks. So just like Neon, this allows it to call itself from the drop to the field, which is more ways to preserve your hand. And it has a guard restrict. Now, depending on how these skills are worded and what their timing is, it might be possible if you have a Neon and a Radon in your drop zone that they both activate, you first resurrect the Neon, and because there's now a Neon, you can call the Radon in front of it and still still call an entire column without any problem. That might be the combo between these two. This could be interesting. I'm not sure how good it's going to be, but looks pretty dope. And then of course we got Nebula Lord Dragon, and for Nebula Lord Dragon we have the effect, lock the rearguard at the expense of allies, lock even without opponent's rearguards. A Star-Vader that powers up Star-Vaders by the number of opponent's lock cards. So this is exactly like the original Nebula Lord Dragon. You retire one of your units to lock one of your opponent's cards. That's what the original one did, and it had the limit break skill where you power up your board for every lock card they have. So I assume it's going to be the same thing. The only interesting part here is that it says lock even without opponent's rearguards. So does that mean we're going to lock from hand, or does that mean we're going to lock from deck? We have to wait and see what that actual specification is going to mean. And that's also everything that we've seen so far for all the clan collection reveals or pseudo reveals. Now, I'm not gonna do this again because this video has been way too long. For the next coming reveals so far, I'm gonna do 4 clans per video, so expect 4 more videos, and we already have 8 clans discussed, so we have only 16 left. So I'm gonna do them once every 2-ish days, as we gotta get 2 clans per day. So that's basically doing the math. That's updates for every 2 days. But that said, I am very curious of what you guys think of all these reveals. There's a lot to go over and a lot to digest. So let me know in the comments down below for at least which type of card you're the most excited about and which skill description are you the most interested about and what it could actually mean in actual skill text and how that can interact with your respective clans, your deck, your combo pieces. Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below, because it's pre-V clan collection season, and that always means it's hype season. As always, this video has been brought to you by lovely patrons over at patreon.com/insider. You guys are amazing. If you want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/insider and become a patron today. But with that said, I've been Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!